I thought you were going to stay here. I was so happy. I don't have to get up and speak. That was awesome. So thank you so much for the lovely introduction, and welcome. Thanks for joining. There are seats here in the front in the pink tent. There's seats in between. I am Michael Neer. If you want to tweet, it's at Michael Neer is the handle. If you want to connect on LinkedIn, feel free to do that. And we're going to spend 45 minutes on persuading the Bay Area and engaged communities. And it's a funny thing how I got to talk about this. Now we think that creating great software in itself is enough to be successful in the organization. And that's a funny thought, because when I left college, about my bachelor degree, in 20 years ago, oh my God, I was convinced that really doing a great job is what gets you to great results. And there is this element called influencing that really makes or breaks our success in the organization. And about 18 years ago, I was working at a startup doing voice over IP as a product manager, product owner. We didn't know product owners back then, and didn't do Agile. And I was laid off. And I was looking for a job for a year and a half, and I think I might hold the Guinness World Record for the shortest time of employment, from onboarding to quitting. It's 200 minutes. It's a good record, I guess. The thing is, I was laid off from that place, and I was looking for a job for a year and a half. I was living in Israel at the time, and I just couldn't find a new job. I was doing my master's degree in project and portfolio management. I was writing a thesis. I couldn't find a new job. At the time, my brother-in-law worked in Tel Aviv. I was in Haifa, and he said, "Michael, I just found a new place for you." This is after I was unemployed for 18 months, and I had a newborn who's now 17. I'm dating myself. So I was really excited. I was so happy. It's like a new job. And then I remember waking up 6:30 in the morning, taking the train from Haifa to Tel Aviv, starting the new job at this fintech startup, amazing place. 8:15, I start working there. 11:45, I call my wife. I tell her, "Honey, I'm coming home." And she was like, "What? You only the morning, and you've already decided." And the funny thing is that the experience I had of over these 3.5 hours is something that was repeated for me, maybe for you too. And initially I thought I was mistaken. I'm the one who was wrong. My in-laws, my father and mother-in-law, thought it was crazy because I found a job and now I'm quitting so fast. My brother-in-law didn't speak to me. My wife was like, "What the heck, Michael? What are you doing?" The thing is that this is not really weird. We have this ongoing problem in the workplace. It's called the wrong presentation. That's what it's called. Oh, no worries, we'll work with this. I'll just be skipping slides. So the funny thing here is that it's not so funny, not the wrong presentation. But what we're experiencing in the workplace, it's called the disengagement pandemic, and the research by Gallup shows us that about 70% of us aren't really excited to be in a workplace. We're disengaged. And people will ask you, "So what? So what if you're disengaged? What does it matter if you're happy to be at work or you're unhappy to be at work?" So actually there are real consequences for that. When people aren't happy to be at work or disengaged, 70% of us, we experience pain. We experience unhappiness. But that's not all. We leave the place, just like I left that place in Tel Aviv about 18 years ago, 17 years ago, because you just don't like it. Now, it also impacts the bottom line of the organization. It impacts the money they're making because high turnover, new employees, then people leave, they come back. It impacts the bottom line. Over the last 20 years, I've noticed a recurring pattern. So we think Google, LinkedIn, Twitter, they're great organizations because they have great code, and then they create great teams. But it's not really the way it works. There's a pattern here. And the pattern here is that successful organizations embrace a certain influencing style. We call this influence, I call this influence, horizontal influence. This is what we're going to talk about today. How do we create great organizations through horizontal influence? Now, unsuccessful organizations, they embrace top-down influencing patterns. This leads to this disengagement. And we're going to talk more about that just now. So, in the past, nobody really cared if you were engaged at work. Now, if you think about that, if you were a pharaoh, each and every one, was a pharaoh building a huge pyramid, you really didn't care if the people doing the work were engaged in what they were doing. If you didn't have enough people doing the work, you just went and conquered some more countries. You went and conquered Israel or Persia or Babylon. You got more slaves to do the work. Now, this thinking, that's the problem. This thinking has endured. Give me a raise of hand. How many people here in the audience, big audience, use the term or are used to hearing the term resource? Resource. So give me a raise of hand when it comes to people. Look around you. Look around with your raised hand. This is just nuts because we are not resources. And there's a funny joke, and I'm going to quote it, so it's not my joke. I think it's one of the Agile signees on Manifesto. I don't remember who said that. If you can go home to your friend, spouse, loved one, and tell them, hey, resource, let's have sex, and they agree, and then okay, you can call anyone you want now resource. If you can't do that, please call people, team members, contributors, right? We're people, we're not resources. Resources are cranes, our lights, our tables, are this timer here that's running. These are resources. People are not resources. Organizations that fail treat others as resources. I don't want to be called a resource. Don't call me a resource. When we do that, the pattern of influence becomes vertical. It's a win-lose paradigm. It looks something like this, right? Let's say one of you needs something from another person in the organization. They don't report to you. You can't influence them directly. What do you do in a disengaged environment? You call your boss. What does your boss do? He calls their boss. What does their boss do? They call them. And they say, why aren't you collaborating? So either you win and they lose, or they win and you lose. That just doesn't work, right? Doesn't make any sense. How can we create awesome things together if that's the paradigm of our organization? This leads to disengagement. Engaged communities, teams that work very well together, embrace horizontal influence. I can reach out to people, I can work with them, even if they're not on my team. Now, a lot of us want to create those great, amazing teams. Here's a little secret. Great teams are not built as a 9-person, 7-person team. If you look inside, if you take a microscope and look inside into what's inside a great team, you'll notice dyads and triads, group of 2 and group of 3. How many best friends do we have had in high school or today? 1 or 2, right? So great, if we want to create this awesome team, it's built grounds up. And I give you a challenge for this evening, for the mixer and the party. Look around how teams of 5 or 7 form. It's always formed from 2s and 3s and more 2s. Great teams are built on smaller elements. So create the smaller elements, you create engagement, you create great teams. In Agile, this is very evident. Agile is not about Scrum Masters, not about product owners. Anyone here is a Scrum Master? Okay, we have a few. Anyone here works in an Agile team? All right, awesome. We're thinking that Agile is about backlogs. it's about product owner, scrum master. It's not. It's about a different paradigm of collaboration that's created by interactions, individual interactions, horizontal influence. Then we try to scale. And we use Scaled Agile Framework. And I'm an SPC, I'm SPC consultant, and yet one of my problems with Scaled Agile Framework is once we introduce the top-down mechanism, we break the collaboration that we tried to create. This is also true if you're using the Spotify model and you're not keeping the true interactions internal to the squad. Once you impose top-down controls that are stringent, you're killing collaboration. Once you instill a manager that don't understand how to retain the team interactions, the horizontal influence, you're killing what you're trying to accomplish. So how do we do that? How do we engage? How do we create horizontal influence? I'm going to share with you a model. I'm sorry for this. This is my mess up. I apologize. So, how do we build great engaged communities? 4 steps: situation, perception, decision, and strategy. I'll use the next 30 minutes to give you tips and some secrets and some really powerful tools to do that even today. So if you're a team member, if you're an individual contributor, you do that by changing how you interact with your peers and with your boss and with people reporting to you. If you are a boss, then you create small kernel teams of engagement. So let me share with you situation, perception, decision, and strategy to creating these amazing, awesome teams. So first one, understanding the situation. We have this notion that situation is something that is out there, that it's real. Now, that there is an objective reality. Maybe. However, I'll give you a challenge. Take 2 screens, and one of them put CNN, and one of them put Fox News, and just sit for 5 minutes. What you'll notice is that the way I see reality, the way I observe reality, and the way others see it is not the same. There is a gap. If I want to influence others, if I want to influence my peers, I need to acknowledge that I'm not always right. And 2 days ago, we ran a workshop. I see some people who joined the workshop. And part of that workshop is understanding what does it mean for us to not be right all the time. I'm not right all the time. I just fucked up, sorry. I brought the wrong presentation, for crying out loud. We make mistakes. The way we see things and the way others see the same things are not necessarily, we're not always seeing the same thing. We're not always the one who are right. So let's say we're sitting in a meeting. In a meeting, there are 10 other people. How many of those 10 other people will support you whatever you say? What do you think? 1, 2, no one. If there's no one, then you didn't really prepare well for the meeting, because you always want to have a wingman. You always want to go into a meeting with someone supporting what you're about to say. Otherwise, you can, just sharpen your resume. And then we go into this meeting. I'm skipping all the slides here. We're going to this meeting, and how many people are completely against us, no matter what we do, no matter what we say, from those 10 people? 5, you need to look for a new job. How many are completely against us? If it's 5, it's really a problem. I'll give you some coaching later. How many are completely against us? 1. What about all the rest? What about them? They're hacking away at their laptops. Well, what about them? They're not interested, or they're sitting on the fence. They don't really care about what's going on. What are they waiting for? They're waiting for coffee, exactly, in like 25 minutes. They're waiting for coffee. Now, here's the thing. If we're trying to influence others in the meeting, what do we normally do? Who do we direct our attention? Hold me honest. Hold yourself honest. And the person who agrees, that's great. However, what do we normally do? The decision maker, okay, I get another honest response here. How about the person who's the most against us? I see some nods. Why do we do that? We don't want them on our side. What happens when we do that? They break the crowd. That's a great insight. So what happens is, if there's a person who's very much against us and we start arguing with them, all the people on the fence now have to choose sides. This is bad. We never want to let other people choose sides because half of them will choose it against us. We don't want to do that. That's the worst thing we can do. What we want to do is show a direction for the people who aren't decided to support what we have to say. By the way, we're not necessarily the ones supporting the idea. We can have our wingman talk to the idea. Now, children, when they're 3, they know that. They know that they never come into a meeting with one idea and ask people, hey, support my idea. What do they do when they come from kindergarten? Anyone has a 3-year-old or brother, or maybe a parent. Anyone has a 3-year-old parent. I know, regardless. What do? They bring a painting from kindergarten and they say what? They give 2 paintings and they say, which one do you like better? Why? Because they're smart. They don't want to give you the opportunity to say, I don't like this one, and they're very sad. They always give you 2 options. We forget that when we're going into a meeting. If we're going into a meeting with one great option and people don't like that option, that's where we're pretty much, don't want to use the word. So we need to come up with 2, because then which one do you like more? Like 3-year-olds know very best because they don't want to be frustrated. So if you want to influence others, make sure that the person you bring in that agrees with you no matter what supports the idea. Avoid working with a person who's always against you. And create a path for people to join by offering them more than one idea to create engagement. Now, many times we talk about creating trust. It's very important. It's an exercise I run, and people say, trust, what is trust? And trust is very tricky. What is trust? So the funny thing is we forget the fundamentals when we want to create trust in meetings. We want to create a trustful environment, and people forget one very basic thing. The easiest way to create trust is through liking. People like other people. And people think that liking is a nasty thing, that we need to, suck up to someone. Sorry for using that language. Liking is a very basic human behavior. How do we create liking? We create shared experiences. We share an experience. When we go into the meeting, we need to share an experience. Another way to create liking is through reciprocation. Reciprocation is I give something, you give something back. Our entire currency system is based on reciprocation, right? We know that this is worth something because someone else is willing to give us something. Reciprocation is the base of our civilization. So reciprocation is I do something small for me, you do something small for you, I give something small for you, you do something small for me. Reciprocation is a basis, bless you, of creating a community of engagement. We move away from them, but actually it's very important to create communities of engagement that we need to build through reciprocation. Let's talk a bit about perception. About our perception, how I believe that people think about me, how I believe. It's one step deeper than the situation, because here's the funny thing. Influence doesn't really happen out there. Influence happens here. The discussion we have, keep going, that little person in our head that speaks to us, even right now when you're looking at me, it speaks to us. Oh, this Michael, what is he talking about? I don't know. Right, this little person here, this is the influence guy or gal. So in order to influence, we need to talk to that person to see what that person is saying. How do they perceive? So let's talk a bit about that. Usually, when we perceive something, we see a certain piece of the pie. And often, what we see is what is important for us. Oftentimes, this is not what is important to the people we're with because they're not us. But I kept saying, we like to believe we are always right. We're always correct. It's hard for us to imagine that there are other people who have a completely different experience. Because we're not the same. Now, the challenge here is we live in our bodies. How can it be that I am not right? My experience has always been me, 18, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years. I have my own experience. So I have my own perception. So it's very hard for me to take a step back, a step out, and influence others at the same time. So I want you to think about a person at work now. Hopefully they're not here in the room. They really can't stand and you have to work with, and you have to influence them. I want you to think about that person. Maybe they're the reason you're sitting here right now. I know for sure that people in the workshop brought that with them. Think about that person. They are the one you need to influence. You can't just stand the sight of them. Think about that person for a sec. If you had to describe him, what 5 words will you use to describe him? Think about, or her. Think about those people. You might want to write down. Now, if it was a workshop, I'd ask you to role play them. However, I want you to take the opportunity now, and I'll give you a minute or two for that. I want you to think about that person and think about the words you described. And if they're not immediately around you, I want you to introduce yourself to the person next to you and share with them, what do you find so hard influencing that person? And I want to give you a minute or two to do that. So introduce the person next to you and share with them, why do you find it so hard influencing those people that you were just thinking of? Okay. So now I want to share with you a few thoughts about this and about this exercise. The people we find the hardest influencing are usually the people who have behavior patterns that we're unease with. Well, many times these patterns are things we're unease with in ourselves, and we find it hard to overcome. So I want to give you an example here. Let's say you're late for a meeting. What excuse do you give? What happened? Why are we late to a meeting? Because I was at another meeting. Oh, bad coffee. I had traffic. More excuses, right? Pardon? No excuses. The dog ate my homework. And what about that annoying person you were just thinking about? When they're late for a meeting, what do we say? They're always late because they're annoying and lazy. They're schmucks. What else? So I have a 17-year-old at home, And when he does something that I dislike, I immediately look at my wife and I tell her, that's your father-in-law. That's your father-in-law. He eats like a mess. I'm like, that's your father-in-law. He eats like a mess like that. The funny thing is, it's not that funny. When we do something wrong, because we live in ourselves, we can't blame ourselves because we're immaculate, we're perfect. It's always the environment. However, when the people we dislike, especially though we dislike the most, I love my son, by the way, especially those we dislike the most, we don't blame the environment. We blame their personality for their behaviors. Now, one, I've never met a personality. It's an abstract. It's a construct of our minds. There's no such a thing as a personality. If you meet one, just let me know. I'll shake their hands. Now, the other thing is we don't give them the benefit of the doubt. We don't allow ourselves to say, hey, they're impacted by the environment as well. This is a recurring pattern. One way to start engaging and influencing the people you find the hardest to work with is to give them the benefit of the doubt. They're impacted by the same organizational environment that you are impacted by. We tend not to give enough credit to the environment for creating many times disengaged workplaces. The environment is much more powerful than we would like to imagine. Therefore, if you want to influence others, start by allowing yourself to perceive that they're also impacted by the same environment. And then start making excuse for them. It will allow you more freedom here. Remember, all influence happens here. This is where we need to let go to create awesomeness in our organization. This is where. Many times people behave in a way because the organization impacts them to behave in a certain way. So for ourselves, we provide excuses. For others, we blame their personality. Think about what environmental impacts they have as well. And then, if you want to think about what is the true question that creates great influence with others, is a how question. Because if we ask, why are they behaving like that? We've already put the blame. If we ask, how can we help them move away? It's future facing. And I'll get more to that in 5 minutes. So I talk about persuading the bear. Why? Well, imagine you wanted to go out hiking in Alaska. Alaska has big bears. You took two big friends with you, went to Denali National Park. When you enter the park, you meet the rangers, and the rangers tell you, well, guys, this is bear land. And together with all your equipment, you need to take special bear canister to put your food in. But also you need to know how you behave in bear country. And I won't ask you to read this. I will say that if you go to bear country and you meet a bear, there are basically several things that you can do. You can run, climb a tree, stand your ground, play dead. And it depends what type of bear that is, if it's a grizzly or it's a black bear. So you read this and you're a bit concerned, and you tell your friends maybe it wasn't such a great idea traveling all the way up to Denali National Park and going hiking in the wilderness. But they tell, well, we're already here. Before you leave, the ranger tells you something that's very important to know. If you see a young black bear, it could actually be a grizzly because sometimes their fur doesn't change. And sometimes adult female grizzly bears, they look a bit blackish. So you don't really know unless you check for the gender. I'm not sure you want to do that. So you go hiking out, and then you meet a bear, a real bear. However, that bear is not when you're in the bus that took you to your hike. They're 4 meters away on the side of the lake, and you're just changing your clothes, and your friend tells you, hey, there's a bear here. And you're like, what do you mean? There are many bears in Alaska. No, he's saying, it's right over here. So the next picture, you're with heart in underwear. You're looking, the three of you at a bear with underwear because you're just exchanging clothes. Your friend has bear spray at the bear, pointed, forgot to remove the trigger. What is the first thing you do? You raise your hands and you say, go away, bear. Let's do that for a second. Let's do this all together. Let's raise our hands. I'll ask you because it's important. Go away, bear. Go away, bear. What do you notice when you raise your hands? When you're trying to influence, size matters. Size matters when you're trying to influence, right? There's a difference how big you are. This is much bigger, right? So if you need to influence and you're usually perceived as very small, you need to increase your size. How do you increase your size? You use more space. If you're very big and you're coming off as intimidating, sometimes you need to reduce your size by taking a step back, not falling off the stage. You need to be careful. So size does matter. Now the funny thing is, we tend to think that influence is zero-sum and it always should be the same. So I ask people, how do you influence? Say, I use data, I use analytics, I use this, I use that. But when you meet a bear in the wild, you can't, if you want to stay alive, you can't keep the same influence approach, because if the waving your hand doesn't work and the bear charges at you, you need to change your approach. The funny thing is, in the workplace, we don't. We are known as the same person over and again. We never take the opportunity to change how we interact. And I'll give you an example. But before that, do we adapt at the office? So let's say you encounter Bill or Lauren from finance at the office. You do not run, because running may elicit a change response. Bill or Lauren, you cannot outrun them. If Bill and Lauren are unaware of you, detour quickly and quietly. Hold your ground should Bill approach or charge you. Do not run, do not drop your pack. Lauren sometimes does fake charges. Play dead if contacted by Lauren. If Bill or Lauren make contact with you, play dead. Statistically, most Bill or Lauren finance attacks are short. Defensive reactions by feeling threatened, fight backs against Lauren. If Lauren makes contact, fight back, the charges are less likely to be a bluff. The funny thing is, when we're back at the office, we usually don't adapt. We have several ways that we adopted since childhood, and this is how we do. We either do push, we do pull, or we withdraw. We don't even think about changing our approach. And this is really important, because if we have one approach to always influence everyone, how successful can we be? If your boss always knows that you're gonna approach them with an idea and tackle it the same way, how successful can you be? So I'm going to switch through many slides here. Look at these slides because they speak to our patterns. And what I encourage you is to ask yourself, am I a push? Am I a pull? Is it always working for me? Maybe I need to tweak a bit my style. Because if I'm always the same, the bear will always eat you. Or not. However, if you meet a certain type of bear, they eat people, and you're using the same push approach, you never climb a tree, because grizzlies can't climb, black bears can. If you climb the tree, and maybe it'll save your life. When we're back at the office, we don't alternate, we don't change. The secret to being a good influencer is to changing our approach. We got to do that. Otherwise, we're all perceived the same. Yeah, I know Bill, he'll always do this. Oh, I know Lauren, she always does that. You need to start thinking about, what would a push look like? What would a pull look like? So there's a few options here for push. Push can be asserting. Push can be giving incentives. Push can be giving pressure. And as I'll go through this, you'll probably say, oh, this is me. This is what I do. And if you're already able to recognize how you do, that's not necessarily a good thing. It means that you've adapted to a certain approach to influencing that doesn't necessarily allow you to engage others, the ones you need the most help from. And then there's pull, encouraging, and pull, listening, and sharing, and inspiring, and some people always draw. If you have a certain approach, see if you can take a step outside your comfort zone and maybe use a different style next time. I want to talk about styles a bit longer, because the funny thing is that we have a style, a strategy, that we usually adopt. So we have people who are more on the responsive side, less directive. This is people-oriented. We have people who are more directive, less responsive, action-oriented. We have idea-oriented, process-oriented. Let me let me show you what happens in many of our meetings and to give you some ideas about what you can do differently to engage, to create these communities of engagement. So people-oriented folks, and this is generalizing by intent, because I want you to think about the interactions that you have with the people that you find hardest to work with. So the people-oriented folks, they like certain words. Now, it's not that they only use these words. However, if you look at your communication, they usually have words such as people, need, sensitivity, relationships. If you look at idea style, their preference is for words such as concept, innovation. These are product marketing people, your POs. You have process style. Your QA tends to be, right? It's not the people that became QA now use these words. The other way around. They have a certain communication and influencing preference, and they like to use words such as fact, details, procedure, observation, proof. A lot of folks here in this room, I would imagine that's their go-to influencing style. It's not that they can't use others, it's just that this is what they're more comfortable with. And then you have your project managers that wants results, objectives, and you're in a big meeting with all four styles. Or normally, you're just with your friends who are probably the same style. That's why they're friends, because you feel comfortable with them. That doesn't allow you to create horizontal engagement. In order to create horizontal engagement, think about that meeting. What happens in that meeting? The project manager says what? They'll say, oh, we got to do that release because our objective is to release this product, blah, 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 in performance, and there's a big challenge, but we decided to release, right? And then you get the process style folks. The QA will say, what do you mean we got to release? There's no proof. The validation failed. We got to do more analysis for this release before we head out. Then you got your idea style, your product management. These tend to be the me's of the world. As an agile coach, I'll say, this is all small. Let's think about the bigger opportunity. In 2 years, we'll be all over the market. And then you got the people-oriented people in the room, and they'll say, people have been working 24/7. They're dying. We need to maintain the relationships. We need to keep the spirit. I just need a hug. And the problem is that if we don't listen to how people phrase, how people think, how people describe what their needs, use different words differently, we'll never be able to create horizontal engagement. So the next time we're in a meeting, look at the word patterns. Look at your word patterns. The funny thing is we have so many words, and yet we use the same set of words in our emails, in our presentations, in our documents, in meetings that we participate in, and this is crazy. Because these words are the words we like, and they influence us. The funny thing is it's not us that we need to influence. We need to influence other people. So if we want to influence other people, we need to be more attentive to what words they like to hear. How do we influence a polar bear? How do you influence your boss? What if you want to get a raise? What do? How do you get engagement? Well, most people will ask for something, right? And then the other side, 90% of the people, right, will ask the other side for a number. You ask an engineer, you ask an engineer, how long will that take? And they'll say it takes 6 weeks. Now you know it needs 12 weeks, or you know it needs 2 weeks. Once they've given that number, you're basically screwed because it's an anchor. You always want to give the number. Always. Always. So if you're asking for a raise, you should say, well, I think this should be, 400 gold pieces. However, you never ask for anything. You never give a number without a range. You always want to use ranges. And the range is 400 to, and you look at the response. If you see that, like, oh my God, 400 to 350. And if you see, oh, no problem, 400 to 600. Nobody ever said the range has to go anyway. It's all in our heads. Influence is in our heads. So when you're using the options of influence, think about creating anchors, creating frames to enable other people to collaborate with you. Move away from one number. Move away to ranges. And then, not a lot of time here. I just want to give you some more thoughts about how do we do this? How do we work with someone who's very hard to influence? Maybe that person you mentioned. All we have to do is to use the following best practice. Repeat their 3 last words once, twice, then summarize. My son wants a $100 gift card on Amazon. You want a $100 gift card on Amazon? He says, yes, I need it to use at school. Oh, you need to use it at school. Yes, all my friends have it. So all your friends have it. Yes, that's what I said. I said, okay, so you want a $100 gift card on Amazon, all your friends have it, you need it at school. And they'll say, and he'll say, yeah, well, I hope he's not watching the video now. And he'll say, yeah, that's right, that's great, because it didn't say no. When you say no, people think that no is a bad thing. No is the best thing that ever happened. If you get a no, the next thing, if you offer something, you'll get a concession. Why is that? Reciprocation. When someone gives you a no, you've already primed them to give them a yes, to get a yes from them. Hey, do you want this thing for $1,000? No way, I'm not going to take it for $1,000. Oh, so I have a small t-shirt for $5. Would you take it? Right? So no is a good thing. When you repeat the 3 last words, he didn't say no, I'm listening to him, I want to see. And then he says, okay, Dad, what do you think? And I said, well, I'm not sure. How do you suggest we do that? That's the magic formula. How do you suggest we do that? So how do you suggest we do this? Very, very powerful. That's part of the workshop that we had there. I'm seeing here some anxiety with the timing. Yes, I know. Think about all these thoughts. Remember, influence is a game that is played here. It's not there's nothing real. It's all abstract. It's all here. It's how we decide to approach a situation, create engagement, and build a community. So I'm going to skip a few more slides, and I want to leave you with one last thing. If we want to create awesome teams and great companies to work with, we need to think differently about engagement, and about engagement with others, and about influencing others. And these are not the others that we're necessarily the most comfortable with. Thank you very much for joining. I think that leaves for time for questions.
Yeah, we do have some time for questions, and it's on Slido. Oh, here it is. So let's see the first one. What's your opinion on the Spotify guild system for larger organizations?
Oh, that's a great question. So I had a chat with Henry Knieberg, who was Agile Coach Spotify about 4 years ago. No one system is good for everything. However, if you do adopt this, always think, how do you maintain engagement on the squad level? Because what companies do, they say, oh, we need a different way. Oh, let's just feed all the crap down the developers, all the features. Let's tell them what to do. Let's tell them, doesn't matter which model you use. So if you're using the Spotify model, think, how do you retain engagement and collaboration, rather than how do we create a bigger structure to manage all these engineers so they do what we want? That's the wrong way. The right way, how do we build this up? How do we create engagement that flows up, rather than how do we push engagement down on people? Hope this helps.
Great. Another from Mariam. If my style... Oh, thank you.
If my style...
Yeah, works... Oh.
If my style works 80% of the time, here's the thing. Whatever I said, nothing works 100%. Everything I said today works better than the alternative. If your style works all the time, you don't need to change it. Keep it. All I'm saying is you'll notice that for the 20%, you need to start exploring other venues. Usually what happens is for the 80%, we've already succeeded. How do we engage the other 20%? So the question is not, should I do? It's rather, how do I change when I need? Right? Okay, if I change my can-do integrity, that's a great question. We touched it a lot in a one-day workshop. Everything I said here needs to be done with the thinking of how do we improve on the organization? How do we improve on engagement? If that means cutting your integrity, move away from that. That's not good for you, right? Do what you're comfortable with and just take a small step outside. Not this. This is too much. Small step. How does it feel? Experiment. Experiment a bit. See if that works for you. Don't get up in the morning and say, today I'm just going to be this warlord pharaoh, right? No. Small changes makes this. Do I have a wingman in the audience? No, I don't think so. Maybe I do. Is it a real accident to have the wrong presentation or presentation technique? I don't know what that question is, but I'm really pissed that I didn't have the wrong one. I really apologize for that. How do you work with confirmation bias with dealing with perception? Wow, this will take you more than the 2 minutes. If you want to ask me about that, just stay here, and I'm happy to chat about confirmation bias. It's a really good question. It's an awesome question. What is the weightage of the idea itself compared to the way you present it? Again, great question. So I have this game with cards, and if you want to, happy to explain. Read to, if you want to stay here, I'll explain how I use that. So if you want, stay, and I'm happy to chat more, but it'll take me 5 minutes. How do you say indecisiveness for team members? Ooh, indecisiveness of team members. I'm going to stay with that. Remember, the indecisiveness is a label that we decided. It happens here. There's no real indecisiveness. If we tweak the thinking here, it tweaks how we handle team members, right? If you need to work with team members that you think are indecisive, break them into pairs. Say, hey, today we're going to do a different perspective or a different decision protocol. Work with someone you normally don't work, pair up with them, come up with an idea. Become a facilitator rather than a decision maker. Let the team own the idea by breaking them into triads and pairs, and then let them meet together and create a decision for the two pairs together. Facilitate decision making. If you're feeling that you're the decision maker and you need them to decide, create decision by breaking them into dyads and triads, and then do a debrief. 2 dyads meet and decide. 4 and 4 meet and decide. That's how you break indecisiveness in the team. I would own it to the team by creating small groups of collaboration.
Thank you so
much. All right,
much.
thank you so much.
Our time is up. Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. I'd like to give you this small present from the organizer team.